The moon race, one of the most memorable events of the 20th century, is also one of the most controversial. Arguments from supporters of the lunar conspiracy theory appeared, which are still popular. They ask why the American flag flutters in a non-existent wind, and why the astronauts' boot prints don't match the photographs. They also question how the backward space industry was able to put a man on the moon. Unfortunately, history has an unequivocal answer to this age-old question. Leave your position in the comments, and we'll take a look at the scary statistics. Overall, 57% of Russian adults believe the entire lunar mission was filmed in Hollywood studios. The same opinion is shared by every 6th Briton and every 10th Swiss. Even in the United States, about 3% of the inhabitants sincerely believe that they were deceived, and the Americans did not land on the moon. The lunar conspiracy arose in 1968 after a funny article in the New York Times, which talked about footage similar to lunar footage from astronaut training, shown by a tipsy NASA specialist in a Chicago bar. Conspiracy stories are always in demand, so major claims to facts soon emerged. We will not delve into the details of the movement of the lunar conspiracy, as this will be unnecessary advertising for not too smart people. Let's focus on the facts. The most popular argument is that the photographs from the moon show the American flag flying, even though the satellite has little to no atmosphere and therefore no wind. Lunar conspiracy theorists believe that the photographs were taken in a pavilion on Earth, where wind is common. However, this is an argument that is quickly refuted by anyone with a basic knowledge of physics. There really is no atmosphere on the moon, so a flag stuck on the surface cannot flutter due to the wind, but simply collapses due to inertia. To do this, a horizontal rod was used at the top of the flagpoles, which helped to support the flag's cloth so that it did not sag. During the installation of the flag on the moon, the astronauts shook it, trying to stick it in difficult conditions. Despite the lack of wind on the moon, the flag's shaking was due to a simple physical cause. Shake a towel indoors and it folds. The flag wavered due to these movements, which many mistakenly believe are the effects of the wind. But about the nail in the lid of theories. Reconstructed video footage and photographs show that the position of the flag did not change or fluctuate after it was planted. When it comes to photographs, there are a few more myths to debunk. There are no stars visible on any frame from the moon, although they should shine even brighter in the absence of an atmosphere. Any photographer can explain this situation. When using a high-exposure camera, if you turn your back to the sun, either the face will be clearly captured against a blurred background, or the background will be detailed, but the face will be blurry. The same thing happens with satellite images. If astronauts wanted to show stars in photographs, all objects on the moon's surface would also be blurred. The shooting was carried out during the day, on the illuminated side of the satellite, where the sun shone much brighter than any star. That is why I had to sacrifice the presence of stars in the photographs. By the way, a similar effect can be observed in any modern photographs from space. Long exposures produce beautiful stellar panoramas, but short exposures, such as when shooting the International Space Station with the Earth in the background, did not show the stars in the frame. One of the most absurd yet popular details involves the famous photo of Aldrin's footprint on the lunar surface. A photograph of the sole of an astronaut's boot clearly shows a pattern that is missing from museum photographs. In fact, when Neil Armstrong's team prepared to go to the surface of the moon, they donned special spacesuits and shoes with wider soles. The force of gravity on the moon is much less, and having a wide sole was critical. Therefore, vertical stripes were visible on this sole. This is a simple and logical explanation for those who are trying to come up with fragile and insane arguments in favor of the lunar conspiracy theory. In addition, there are many more small claims that are easily refuted by ordinary logic. For example, there is a question about solar radiation, which, in theory, should have burned all photographs and even astronauts. However, it is worth noting that even 10 years before Neil Armstrong, The Soviet Luna 3 apparatus photographed the satellite without any problems using captured American radiation-resistant film. To doubt the availability of technology developed by the United States back in the 50s in the Apollo 11 space mission in 1969 is absolute idiocy. However, when it comes to astronauts, the situation is even simpler. The ship's hull was well protected, and inside the Gemini 11 apparatus there was only 0.203 radiation per hour, which is not a high figure. But even after such facts, adherents of the lunar conspiracy do not give up. They are not even satisfied with the words of the first man in space Alexei Leonov, designer Boris Chertov, and all high-ranking officials of the USSR. The Soviet Union watched the landing under a microscope, and the slightest hint of falsification would have caused a wide resonance. However, all these arguments do not stop people with tinfoil hats on their heads. They claim that the USSR and the US made a secret deal, under which the Soviets recognize the fakes, and the US undertakes not to disclose information about the allegedly dead Russian cosmonauts. This seems especially funny, given that these two countries almost started World War III. Such an assumption is not serious, is it? Things get even more ridiculous when, in 2009, the LRO Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter probe decided to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the moon landing. The space station took photographs of the lunar modules, landing sites, and even the trails from the Apollo mission carts. But even this could not dampen the ardor of some adherents of the conspiracy. The final and main argument is the fact that since 1972, despite huge progress, we have not been able to resend a man to the moon. Only now similar programs are beginning, and the first planned space flights are planned not earlier than in 10 years. This fact logically raises questions. If Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon in 1969, then 50 years later, in theory, this should be available to everyone, given the huge advances in computer technology. However, NASA says the re-landing will take a lot of work, and if everything goes well, we will return there only in 2024. This means that progress is not always linear, and today's challenges require the development of new technologies and approaches. It is also worth noting that in 1966 NASA received almost 5% of the US federal budget, which, adjusted for inflation, was a whopping $43 billion. This is practically equal to Russia's current defense spending. In comparison, in 2018, NASA received only 0.5% of the federal budget. The space race has cost US taxpayers dearly in the past, which is why it was canceled. In addition, it turned out that the moon is not such an attractive object for research as expected. Enough soil has been brought in, and research on our natural satellite has not brought significant scientific discoveries, with the exception of creating a base for the study of Mars, which NASA is going to work on. Elon Musk and his company SpaceX also promised to establish a base on the moon by 2015. However, they had to start almost from scratch, since all projects were curtailed and mothballed for 50 years. Time has passed and a lot has changed. Now scientists are looking for modern analogs of technologies and developing new approaches. However, people usually have more interest in new iPhone models than space exploration. Funding astronauts has become much more difficult, and they currently face limited resources. However, everything may soon change, and in our century, humanity will again return to the moon, and then, perhaps, go to Mars. If you have any questions regarding the lunar conspiracy, leave them in the comments, and we will definitely answer them.